What were some of your creative endeavors before Theater in the Dark began?
Yeah, I work with Second City. I teach improv and writing and acting there, as well as direct there. And then I kind of work all over the place. I come from Atlanta originally, and I worked with like a lot of non-traditional theater, a lot of immersive performance, and also a lot of new work and work in untraditional or like non-traditional venues. And so I've brought that into a lot of what we do with audio dramas as well.
What is the recording process like, and how has it evolved since the company's inception?
That's a great question. We started performing shows in person in pitch black conditions, and then as soon as quarantine happened with the pandemic, we took that show that we had premiered in fall 2019, Three Stories Up, and were basically able to transcribe that into a live Zoom performance, which had our original two actors coming back and presenting things from three different locations in live or in real time across Chicago. And from there, then that started us on developing another show specifically as a live audio drama that was performed online. And then as we kept finding what worked and what people responded to, now we still keep the remote quality, so we're able to work with actors all over the place. But we also are able to still rehearse in real time, much like you would for a theatrical play. And even though now with Murder in the Court of Xanadu is pre-recorded, it still maintains the quality of like live performance because the actors were recording all of that and rehearsing all of that together in real time from day to day. So our methods are still evolving, but what we're doing now is like pre-recording, but having everybody there just like you would be experiencing it beginning, middle, and end as an audience member and on a live show.
Tell us a little bit about the season passes on your website. How did that get started, and why did you start it?
Yeah, the season passes are something we're trying out for this year. Specifically, it covers our comedy noir we released over the summer, A Matter of Red Herrings, the show that we're doing now, A Murder in the Court of Xanadu, and then a third show that'll be released in early 2023, The White City, all about the serial killer H.H. Holmes. So, and partially because we've normally been project to project and just creating one audio play at a time, but people were really interested in like a season like it would be in a in-person theater. So we packaged those together as a way to be able to reward sort of repeat listeners and people that don't just want one story, but that really enjoy listening to a multitude of stories. And between these three, this is our experiment of this season. And we've been able to reconnect with people from Chicago and across North America, and in some cases internationally as well. So lumping them together, we now sell them through our website directly. You can get a season pass, which would include audio streaming online as well as digital downloads for each of those three plays. So people that signed up in August are able to get a fun release and an extra play now, and then an extra play in a couple of months as well, while only having to make one purchase.
Was your first audio play always supposed to be an audio drama, or did you adapt it from another medium?
Yeah, it was adapted, but in a way that made a total sense. That was the show I mentioned earlier, Three Stories Up, was a noir Canadian revenge thriller that we staged in pitch black conditions up at the church on Thorndale. And that was an experiential production where the actors were performing in front, around, behind the audience. And I was also calling cues, pre-recorded cues, and performing live Foley effects, sound effects, as well, moving through. We were all doing it completely blind in 100% pitch black conditions. So through that, again, that was what the show we had done right before the pandemic hit. And so once quarantine hit, we said, well, we already have this rehearsed. We already have most of the sound that we could figure out how to present over Zoom. And that was really the incentive for the first audio drama, which was Three Stories Up. And then from there, we started developing content and scripts specifically for an audio piece. But either way, when we presented that story in person, it was meant to be an oral experience that was heard and not necessarily seen.
What was production on A Murder in the Court of Xanadu like, and what lessons did you learn from previous productions that you applied to this one?
Yeah, Murder in the Court of Xanadu is a couple of years in process. I started doing some basic research early in a quarantine just for fun. A friend of mine was working on a piece about Marco Polo. And so I was really interested in that and was helping him do some research and got interested in some of these other historical characters surrounding Kublai Khan that have directly made their way into A Murder in the Court of Xanadu. So with A White Whale, which was also a piece that I had adapted, I was really interested in writing that in verse, in an iambic pentameter, like Shakespeare. And so I took that and also applied that to what happened with A Murder in the Court of Xanadu. So even though it takes place in the modern day, it still has like this heavier language, this very dense language that gives it an ancient or epic feel. So there were a lot of creative decisions as well as a lot of logistical decisions that went into how we made this. So we wanted to keep the rehearsing in real time, like I had mentioned earlier. We also wanted to make sure that we had a script that is specifically all about the celebration of language, since we have no visual components, and also to separate from a lot of other audio plays. We also wanted something that had original music, as we've had with all of our other audio plays, and original soundscapes as well. So it's not just what people think of a radio play with coconuts knocking around. It's something that really is a 3D listening experience.
What were some of the challenges of keeping the iambic pentameter going throughout the audio play, and why did you decide to go this route?
It's fun and it's definitely a challenge. So for those not familiar with iambic pentameter, it follows a heartbeat rhythm, ba-bump, 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 ba-bump. And there are a lot of reasons for why iambic pentameter, but I also wanted something that like drives the language in the way that a really great Shakespeare, also like that language just moves and it pushes. And I wanted something that, like I had mentioned, was a celebration of language. And so finding ways to say what I wanted to say as the playwright, but then putting it into these 10-syllable images that we're giving to the listener one line at a time was really challenging and fun because the characters are interacting and interrupting each other at points. Some characters have longer speeches where they're able to get into a larger thoughts. Other times they're nitpicking and there's much backstabbing and corporate espionage going on as well. So I think that it was rehearsing with the actors was also one of the best gifts to any writer, especially with iambic pentameter, because hearing how they bring that language to life, this is something that's meant to be heard and not necessarily read. And so hearing how they brought their talents and experience into the roles was one of the final ingredients in rewrites were happening all the way up until our recording days, which was just a joy for me as a writer.
How much research or artistic license went into developing the characters with historical doppelgangers such as Kane and Kublai Khan?
Yeah, as far as research, so I love research. I'm a big history nut. And so I definitely stole liberally from history, but also a lot of the stuff that is said in the play actually happened. Like Ahmad talks about their financial plans, and that was true to the Mongolian Empire with a couple of small changes to make it modern day. Khan talks about like his bloodline, and that's something that Kane in our play also talks about his bloodline. They mention Kane's grandfather, who is Genghis Khan. Marco Polo is named Marla in our interpretation. So you don't need to know anything about the history, but it is infused with history throughout. And a lot of the details about how Xanadu, the company, works in our audio play is a direct reference to how the Mongolian Empire worked. And Kublai Khan was responsible for creating paper money. It was responsible for essentially like what we would know better as like the Pony Express in terms of sending messages across vast distances of land. So a lot of that went directly into the play. And then, of course, as we got closer and closer towards producing the play, more and more artistic license took over to connect dots. Some characters are connections or combinations of historical characters. But I would say that a lot of the play, including the plot itself, is something that directly honors actual history of the Mongolian Empire.